Hello everyone, my name is Asar Edwards. Today I'll be presenting on the reality of oppression and follow this whatever. Hello everyone, my name is Asar Edwards and today I'll be presenting on the reality of oppression and discrimination in Detroit Becoming Human. More specifically, how the game represents real-world oppression, discrimination, and identity within its interactive nature. The topic I'll be focusing on today will be oppression, choice, and identity in Detroit Becoming Human. My research question is, how does Detroit Become Human use science fiction to critique oppression and discrimination? Today I will argue that the android's fight for freedom is a direct allegory for the struggles faced by marginalized groups throughout history and today, including racial discrimination, systematic control, and media biases. By analyzing oppression, choice, and identity, we can see how the game challenges players to rethink what it really means to be human and who gets to decide what freedom is. My thesis is Detroit Becoming Human reflects real world discrimination and systematic oppression through the android's struggle for autonomy. So here's a small summary of Detroit Become Human before we get into the meat of the matter. So the game is set in Detroit in the year of 2038, where highly intellectual androids perform human labor for humans, but are denied basic rights. So we follow these characters, and as you can see right here, I have pictures of the characters from left to right. So Connor, the first character, is a police android programmed to hunt down deviant androids. And deviant androids, these are androids that have, as it says, deviated from their original programming and exhibiting behaviors that show that they may have free will. In the middle, which is Marcus, a domestic caretaker who becomes a revolutionary leader. This happens as a result of an altercation that happens between Marcus's owner and his son. That later leads to Marcus being tossed away and thrown in a dumpster, but is then rebuilt and rebuilds himself to become the revolutionary leader of an organization called Jericho. And then there is Kara. Kara is a housekeeping android who escapes an abusive household to protect a child, and she became a deviant just like Marcus, having to break through her programming to save the child. So depending on the player's choices, the android struggles can either be peaceful and have freedom, or it's a violent revolution, or they are completely annihilated. Throughout the game, the players are forced to confront moral questions about servitude and resistance and identity, and they blur the line between humans and machine. Ultimately, Detroit Become Human uses science fiction to put in real-world questions about justice, morality, and autonomy directly in the player's hands. Oppression in a futuristic Detroit. Androids treated as property and not as people. So, in the world of Detroit Become Human, androids are seen as not individuals, but as property. They are abused, discarded, and replaced whenever they are broken. And this also mirrors the real world history where marginalized groups, especially Black, Indigenous, or immigrant workers, were treated as expendable labor forces. And this stems from a long colonialist mindset that has been implanted for generations that link back to days of slavery. Additionally, Rebecca Johnson explains that marginalized identities are shaped not by individuals' actions, but by the ways that dominant groups assign them as expendable. The game visualizes this and says that androids aren't just malfunctioning, they are waking up, yet society calls them defective and dangerous. This also reflects the real world connotation that angry Black people are dangerous and should be stopped, when in reality, people who are oppressed will want to fight back for their freedom. It also reminds us that systematic oppression often begins by redefining human beings as objects. Marcus and the civil rights parallel. In the game, Marcus is a main character and he was originally a caretaker, as I mentioned before, but then became a revolutionary leader of the group called Jericho. So Marcus's transformation from a caretaker to revolutionary leader directly parallels historical civil rights struggles. In the game, he infiltrates a broadcasting station to broadcast his plea of what he wants to say to all humans as a representative of the androids. His plea was, "We demand the right to exist in peace and dignity." This also echoes Doctor Martin Luther King Jr.'s call for peace resistance during the civil rights movement, and also reflect other movements like the BLM movement and the women's rights movement. However, Charles Polian Moore critiques the game for borrowing heavily from Black American history without fully honoring its weight. By copying protest imagery like marches and sit-ins, Detroit Become Human risk simplifying complex histories into entertainment. Still, it raises the important question: what happens when oppressed groups ask for dignity and power responds with violence instead of justice? Yeah. The psychological impact of oppression. Amanda enforces obedience and Connor struggles internally. Connor's story captures the psychological cost of oppression. Amanda, his handler or his boss, always repeatedly tells him, "Your mission is to accomplish what humans expect of you and nothing more." This mirrors how oppressed groups are often socially programmed, expected to obey, serve, and conform. This provides a real world example of what has historically been happening as white people, the ones that were mostly in power and kind of still are, expect people who are of a marginalized group, Black, Indigenous, etc., to obey and conform to whatever they have to say and take what they give to them and be okay with it. Additionally, Neville and Peters describes how oppression-based stress contributes to mental health disparities in marginalized groups. Connor's internal conflict, loyalty versus freedom, reflects real-world experiences where oppressed individuals must constantly suppress their true selves to survive. Additionally, by playing as Connor, players feel firsthand the devastating impact of living under constant systematic pressure. Connor symbolizes internalized oppression and awakening. So within the game, Connor, as I said before, is a police officer who gets rid of deviancy in other androids. As a police officer, he is a force of enforcement and power who is working for basically the big man. However, in the end, you are given the choice as Connor to either become deviant, breaking out of that system of oppression and freeing yourself and saving people. And the other option was to remain as a robot and a slave and go against his own kind and put them into custody as prisoners or destroy them. Identity under oppression. The media portrays Marcus as a terrorist. Marcus and his fellow androids are criminalized simply for seeking equality. During his broadcast, the media brands him as a terrorist, which is a common real-life tactic used against marginalized resistance movements. Identity is shaped through resistance and decisions. Being in a bad decision, being in a bad situation and being oppressed does not mean that you have to stay that way forever. It is a mindset of wanting to break free from that oppression that will lift you up and build and shape identity. Because if you don't, and you want to remain oppressed and stuck, then that will happen and you will not be free. Additionally, Miriam Asenuga notes that media framing often portrays freedom struggles as violent threats rather than justice movements. This is a powerful reminder that the battle of identity is not just internal but also public. How the world sees you, whether it be as a criminal or a hero, is often shaped by power and not truth, which is a true statement that is often portrayed every day in the real world as people in higher positions like government officials, the president, and even police officers enforce rules based on how they feel and what they want to do rather than how societal norms should work. Theme of choice in Detroit Become Human. Connor's journey highlights how true freedom is about choice and not just existence. Amanda's programming, demanding complete obedience, symbolizes how oppressive systems try to strip marginalized individuals of real autonomy. Connor and Amanda's dialogue, as I mentioned before, says that your mission is to accomplish what humans expect of you and nothing more. This statement shows how systematic power limits free will for those they control. The systematic oppression through programming. Connor's programming mirrors the way real-world marginalized people are forced into roles defined by others. The real-world history echoes this because slavery, colonization, and even modern systematic racism operates by denying groups meaningful choice over their lives. Modern implications. This dynamic reflects lingering colonial mindsets where groups are still seen as beneath others despite the illusion of equality. In the game, players must decide whether Connor remains a tool of oppression or break free. By placing this power into the player's hands, Detroit Become Human forces us to confront how easily we too can accept systems of control or resist them. Cyberlife and systematic control. Cyberlife enforces dominance over androids. Cyberlife, the corporation that creates androids, represents how systems of power manufacture and maintain oppression. This company profits off android labor but denies them humanity. This mirrors how real-world corporations have historically exploited marginalized labor, treating workers as resources rather than people. From plantations to sweatshops, control is maintained through hierarchy, profit, and dehumanization. In Detroit Become Human, Cyberlife symbolizes the chilling idea that that, techno- that technological process doesn't guarantee moral process unless society fights for it. So this is the ending variations and their messages. Multiple endings, whether it be freedom, war, and annihilation. The game has multiple endings, peace, war, or annihilation, and reflects the unpredictable outcomes of real-world resistance movements. It also reflects struggles for justice. When marginalized groups seek justice, the path is rarely straightforward. Public perception, government response, and internal leadership all shape whether movements succeed or fail. It highlights leadership, empathy, and resistance. By giving players agency over these outcomes, Detroit Become Human shows that freedom is never given freely. It must be fought for, nurtured, and protected by every step of the way. Cinematic storytelling as a tool. Lighting, motion capture, and music enhances emotional impact. Beyond the story, Detroit Become Human uses cinematic techniques to make oppression emotional and tangible. The soundtrack by John Payne Paesano intensifies tension. John Paesano's soundtrack builds tension at every key choice. Lighting, close-ups, facial animation, and motion capture makes androids' fear, anger, and hope heartbreakingly real. This emotional realism immerses players, making them feel the weight of discrimination personally, not just intellectually. It's a reminder that storytelling, whether it's a game, film, or book, has the power to build empathy and drive social change. In conclusion, Detroit Become Human is not just entertainment, it's a critique on social oppression, identity struggles, and the fight for autonomy. By analyzing the game's characters, choices, and emotional storytelling, we see that science fiction can mirror real social justice struggles, forcing us to ask who gets to be free and who decides. Ultimately, Detroit Become Human challenges us not only to reflect on the past and present, but consider how we can shape a more just future.